So next up, we've got one of Britain's best-known documentary filmmakers, no stranger at all to Sheffield DocFest, who's been on a transformation himself over the past year or so, working on social platforms. So he's going to come up and tell you how he wants to change the world on a different platform. So Brian Lapping, please come forward.
The first arises from some of my colleagues when I told them I was coming up to Sheffield. And they said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I told them that I was coming to talk about PACS. And they said, "You can't talk about PACS. You've got to talk about our series." So I'm afraid, if you'll forgive me, I have to begin by telling you that tonight at 9 o'clock, whatever the Sheffield Documentary Festival may have on, there's the final programme in our series, The Iraq War. And just in case you think, oh, well, that's bound to be boring, I have to tell you that you probably haven't seen the last two prime ministers of Iraq on television before answering difficult questions, but you certainly haven't seen Condi Rice and Jack Straw getting Jaffrey, the previous prime minister, to give up his job, and you certainly haven't seen Maliki, the present prime minister, facing some of his problems. I strongly recommend the programme. Anyway, that's dealt with my first problem. But my second problem is even worse. Practically everybody who's been speaking here this evening has got a brilliant achievement to tell you about. They've got things going, they've got things sold, they've got money raised. Not me. I've just got an idea, and I'm desperate for help with it. Furthermore, I'm desperate for your help. I will tell you about the idea, and then I'll explain the help I need. The idea could be said to have started when Kofi Annan was in Syria. And you will recall, at the end of his stay in Syria last year, when he had completely failed to prevent the conflict between Bashar al-Assad's regime and its opponents from getting worse, he said that if the uploads by citizens of pictures of violence purporting to be violence by the government of Syria against our village or our town, or alternatively purporting to be violence by the other side against us, the citizens of Syria and the supporters of the government, could only have been evaluated and demonstrated to be true, it maybe could have helped him to prevent war and genocide worsening. And that's what PACS is all about. Now, when he said maybe it could have helped him to prevent war or genocide worsening, what he really meant was that if some of those pictures, which purported to be Bashar al-Assad's people killing citizens in various cities around Syria, could have been given to the government of Russia, then Putin would have felt obliged to say to Bashar al-Assad, this could embarrass us. It really is not helpful that you, our close ally, the recipient of a lot of aid from us, can be seen to be doing this. And that is the origin, really, of PACS. I thought, surely such data can be independently evaluated and can be used to help prevent wars or genocide. So how do we set about doing it? I wrote a paper and I sent it to Google. And the basis of the paper was we need to create an independent, worldwide community of evaluators who have certain special characteristics. And the evaluators who get recruited for any one task have to have knowledge of the place that they're seeking to evaluate. So the question would be, have you been to Syria? When were you last in Syria? What part of Syria did you stay in? Do you speak the local language? Do you have local contacts there with whom you can check stuff? So that an evaluator would have to answer a whole list of questions, but also, in order, in that case, to persuade the Russian government to sell Bashar al-Assad to bloody well cool it down, it would be essential that the evaluators would include a significant proportion of either Russians or people whom the Russians have sympathy with. If most of the evaluators were Americans, if most of the evaluators were Israelis, then the Russians would immediately say, well, that's completely valueless. So PAX is an idea to evaluate data which is currently uploaded every time violence explodes, and use that data to seek to prevent the violence from getting worse. Anyway, I wrote a note to this effect to Google, and Google held a very nice launch event, which they invited people from the United Nations and various people who served in British government, including foreign secretaries and people from high-level organizations. And as a result of that, they then gave me some money to try and develop it further. And we've got to the point now when we really need our next stage in further help. Google have been lovely. One of the things that I thought in the early stages was that it would be possible to develop an algorithm to take these pictures and sort the pictures and achieve the data that would be convincing to the various governments that have authority over one side or the other in the conflict. And Google Ideas in New York did some nice work on that and came to the conclusion you can evaluate words, you can't evaluate pictures. Pictures can only be evaluated by creating a huge community of people. So we've got to find a way of building that specialized community. Now, in seeking to build that community, it seems to me obvious that what we have to do next is choose a place where violence is beginning to erupt. You can't start something so huge and worldwide just by creating it and developing it worldwide. We will have to choose somewhere where violence seems to be beginning to erupt and quickly recruit people who have knowledge about it via the internet to evaluate data that's being uploaded and enable that data to be used. And secondly, we have to get allies who are close to the government of the rival countries that have influence over the parties to the conflict. So in Syria, it would be on one side Russia. It might be that on the other side, I don't know who it would be on the other side, to tell you the truth, but it doesn't matter. So we will have to work out the way to do this and build that organization. Now, I'm in active negotiation with an organization whose name I cannot reveal because I'm only negotiating with them, but it's an international organization that you all know about to, as it were, father PAX. But the next stage is to be able to say, and this is exactly how PAX will work. And in this room, people who've spoken earlier today and others among you probably have more knowledge than I do, although I've got some very good mates who are quite skillful at internet stuff, but you can tell I'm not 21. My internet capacity is, as my age would suggest, negligible. The way to recruit the evaluators and the way to use the evaluators most effectively to get quickly the information, this is a conflict getting worse, these people are truly perpetrating violence, here is incontrovertible evidence of that violence, and you, the government with influence over them, the government that gives them money, the government that has authority, whether it be religious, political, local, whatever, over one side, you must calm your people down or you will be embarrassed. How do I do that? I ask you the question. It's not a matter of you asking me questions, it's a matter of you answering it. Please. Anybody got any ideas? It is an idea so ambitious that it needs all your brain power. And I have to say one thing further. If you haven't got a thought now, I beg you to try and give it a little thought. And if you succeed, my email address, actually, I was supposed to show you something about it. Have you got a thing that you can show me? I can just show you a little bit about the way it's supposed to work. And this is all a bit overground. This is because Google gave us money, so we had to do something pretty. But as you can see, there on the left, we expect when violence is erupting, let's suppose it's in Sheffield, really significant violence between the Yorkshire and Lancashire parties here. So we immediately begin seeking to gather information from all these sources, keyword sources. Now, I haven't mentioned words, but words are obviously one of the very easy things to gather, and they can be gathered and dealt with on the web. You all know more than I do. Murder, ambulance, help, all the sorts of words that give an indication that trouble is building, of course we'd gather those. SMS texts, emails, photos, videos, alert agencies, global information networks. But you can see all that. And we feed all those. Now, this was built at the stage when I thought actually the algorithm could deal with a lot. But as I say, Google have now persuaded us it can't all go through the algorithm. The pictures can't, and they must be individually evaluated. We then propose that the crowd analysis by the registered evaluators will be done by feeding them stuff. They're going to have to work a lot. During the period of crisis, evaluators are going to have to be available to look at data and ask questions about it, phone their friends to get further information about it, compare it to other data, be it from the same village or from a nearby village, so that they can seek to answer the question, does this look convincing evidence that it was that government's army that destroyed that church, blew down that hospital, whatever it was they've done? So the evaluators have got a complicated load of questions to ask. The evaluators' results will be fed continuously into the PAX barometer, and then they'll be verified by specialist evaluators. I haven't talked about the specialists before. The evaluators are all volunteers. The specialists will be people whom we will seek to recruit, who will be recently retired diplomats, people in departments of international studies in universities, recently retired journalists, people who we have to pay to stiffen up the evaluations. Of course you want volunteer evaluations, you want a lot of them, but professional confirmation is wanted as well. And then we have three categories of moment, as it were. It says there PAX alarm. We think that there will be the moment when we ask people to evaluate, which is simply a danger moment, and then it builds up through a middle stage, whose name I've forgotten, to an alarm stage, and it's at the alarm stage that we expect A, to hire the verification specialist evaluators, and B, to get the data forwarded to the government with influence over either side. At this point, I can ask you again, anybody got any thoughts about the best way to organize finding evaluators, getting evaluators, data well organized so as to be most efficiently used to give a warning to the governments on either side? I can tell you this. I have had responses from such a large number of people and organizations who say, this really could be valuable to us. To put it at its crudest level, I didn't approach him. The chap, his name is Simon Thacker. He is the man in the British Cabinet Office who has responsibility for warning the Prime Minister when danger is developing in this place or that. So he invited me and some of my colleagues along to Downing Street, and there we met him and his colleague from the Foreign Office and his colleague from the Defence Department and his colleague from the Department for International Development, who all got themselves involved in helping us to see if we can work this up. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to succeed. It means we need help. I think I've done now, unless somebody has any suggestion they would like to put about how to make this act. Well, I'm prepared to consider a question.
Intelligence services have a responsibility to do that in any case.
Well, now, this is something which I'm absolutely clear about. Intelligence analysts and diplomats, of course, do it already. But I can tell you, a report, violence is erupting in this place. I'm the ambassador here. I'm the intelligence advisor here. And I can pass this up the line. They will get as far as the department of this or that in Whitehall, and they will go some way up the ladder. But they will not get to the point to which the Prime Minister is told, you bloody well have got to take immediate action. In order to alert action, we have to be able to say, look, this is really serious, it is heading towards war or genocide, and if you, the head of the government, don't take action, then this is going to get worse. And there's a strong tendency for the unquestionable information that is being gathered at the moment to just not achieve the result. In his book on, I've forgotten the name of the book, Kofi Annan's book, which he published about 6 months ago, he says, we are all knowledgeable about growing incidents of violence turning to war or genocide, and we are consistently failing to deal with it. And the answer to your question is yes, intelligence and diplomatic people are passing the data along, but the data is not leading to the result that has to be produced. Sorry, there's a lady first. Lady always gets priority. Sorry, I'm deaf as well as stupid.
How many people do you feel the evaluators would be? Would they be everyday normal people, or would they be officials working in some kind of government department?
Well, the answer to that question is we don't absolutely know, but I have certain views about it. I say they must have been in the country for some reasonable length of time. They probably must know the language of that country, and they must have time to give to the evaluation, because when violence is exploding, then you've got to be keeping an eye on it all the time. So that leads me to think that people who've just retired are the absolute model. A, because they've traveled quite a lot, because if they've just retired, they've been traveling for a fair few years. And B, they're usually looking for something to do. But that may not be the right answer to your question. It's my thinking at this moment. Sorry, somebody just there had his hand up. But, sorry, yes.
I guess I would just throw this out to the community. I don't think that I would argue that you need to have these specialists involved. I think you
No, I wouldn't have thought there was...
I'm not trying to help you. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just suggesting that sometimes these things open the door to being used in the opposite way that they're intended to be used.
But I would say at the moment in Turkey, and I base myself simply on what I've seen on television and read in the papers, the violence has been 99% the government and less than 1% the people on the other side. I haven't seen much contradiction of that. So that if one was seeking to say to Erdogan, don't, now who has most influence over Erdogan? Probably the United States government. But it's necessary for somebody to say to Erdogan, stop shooting your own people. I think that's really quite urgently needed. And I think it's possible that PACS could be of value for that.
Hello, sorry.
Sorry, Lady Hill. Forgive me, I'm sorry, I'm deaf. Can you speak up a bit louder? Or actually have a microphone.
Hi, I'm based in Dublin, and there's a news agency there called Storyful. And I don't work for them, I'm not affiliated with them at all, but what I gather that they do is they basically assess pictures and videos that go out on social media for its reliability, for its newsworthiness, and then they would publish essentially the ones that they have deemed as being true and have verified them. So it might be worth connecting with them because they obviously have a verification process in place for social media news, and it sounds quite similar in ways to what you're trying to achieve there. So just a kind of a connector.
Yes, that's helpful. Of course, PACS is attempting to be more intensive in its action on the same front. But yes, that is helpful. Thank you. I've got one more question, then you're going to throw me out, aren't you? Yes. What? Can I take one more question?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Hi, I have a question rather than a suggestion, I'm afraid. What systems and safeguards are in place or are proposed to be in place for the evaluators that you've mentioned? Because there's a lot of places in the world where if you publicly speak out against a government that's murdering its own people, for example, they will come after you or some harm could come to you. So are you suggesting that the evaluators, this kind of system of crowdsourced fact-checking is done anonymously or confidentially, or if you do have a database of registered users, what systems are in place to protect the identity of those people?
That is one of our problems, but it's not an overwhelming problem. Evaluators in the country will be substantially at risk, and maybe we will, in some cases, even not dare have any evaluators in a country, or maybe there are ways that you can hide their identity. Now, hiding their identity is not that easy. All this wonderful stuff that's coming out at the moment about other people's uploads and what they put out on their computers and their telephones indicates that hiding identity is far from easy. But on the other hand, the process is constantly being challenged from the other side, and the government versus uploaders battle is one that PACS might find ways of getting around. But I absolutely take your point. It's one of the themes in the documents we've written. How do we choose A, uploaders, and B, evaluators? We receive from uploaders and choose evaluators so as not to expose them to risk. The answer to your question really is we don't absolutely know. We cannot absolutely guarantee. But uploaders take a chance. They always do. People who send up those photographs know that they're at risk when they do it. When there is violence in the community, people often are prepared to say, A, I will advertise it, show it, and I suspect, B, I will help evaluate it, even though it involves a risk. And if they are aware of the risk and PACS warns them, then I think it's not for us to say, we refuse to accept your knowledge.
So, Brian, can we put your contact details on the Crossover website?
Yes, please.
In case anyone
Yes,
has any suggestions.
I'd be very grateful if you do that.
Great.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.